Hey guys, Jordan coming to you here today from the Storage Review Edge Lab. We've got the Lenovo Legion Go out. It's Lenovo's entry to the handheld gaming market. It's a kind of a Steam Deck. It's a little bit different as far as the size goes. It's a little bit thicker, but it does run full-fat Windows instead of being based purely on Linux like the Steam Deck is. So just for size comparison, here's most of a Steam Deck and the Legion Go. So like I said, one of the most unique things about this that we're seeing, this is kind of like in the space where like the ROG Ally is. It's running a full fat Windows, which does present some challenges, but also gives you some flexibility to use it for other day-to-day tasks or kind of as a pocket computer, albeit a little bit thicker. Now, we've gone ahead and done our full review up on the site. So taking a quick look here at Task Manager, you can see we've got a SK Hynix 1TB SSD on this model. It does come with 16 gigabytes of DRAM. I currently have that configured to use 4 of those gigabytes dedicated to the GPU memory, which is the AMD Radeon graphics that are integrated into the Ryzen Z1 Extreme processor. Now this is a pretty interesting chip. It's got a 30 watt max TDP, which is actually configurable over here in the OS. So I've currently got it in power saving mode, but you can bump it up into performance mode, which will give you a custom power slider if you want it on any of these custom profiles to set the TDP, the OS mode, and adjust the fan speed setting. So at full fan speed, it's a little bit louder than I would want, but it does get the job done. And with any sort of normal headphones that you have on, listening to game music or the in gameplay sounds, you kind of lose that full fan speed, but I found too, if you just turn it off, it will ramp up on its own and handle its own curve. So let's jump straight in. Let's take a look at some 3D Mark benchmark scores here. So taking a look at some of our performance information here that we gathered on this, we wanted to take a look at the performance between running the Legion Go on battery power versus on wall power to see kind of a bit of the performance difference. We found some interesting things here where our presets going between power saving and performance mode gave of the largest jump, and going actually from battery to wall, there was only minor differences in the scores. So the interesting thing looking here at the wall power versus battery power on the performance preset, we don't see much of a change between any of our scores, just barely a handful of percentage points differences between them. And then looking at it on the power saving preset is where you actually start to see a little bit more of the performance hit, but again, it's fairly stable throughout. When we started our initial testing, we saw some really obscene changes between being on wall and battery, which is to be expected to some degree, like we can see in this chart, but it was way more. I reached out, I talked to Lenovo, and they were able to provide, and there is a publicly available BIOS now that you need to go and update if you have a Legion Go that addresses some of these performance issues, specifically relating to how the GPU itself is throttled. We were noticing in our charts that the GPU just wasn't throttling up in order to be able to provide the amount of performance that we need. So that's enough talking about the performance. Let's take a quick look here. We'll go ahead and test out Wildlife Extreme from 3D Mark, which is a cross-platform test designed for handheld gaming sort of like this. And we'll talk a little bit about the key specs once this loads up. So the Legion Go runs the AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme mobile processor. It's designed for this handheld application. It's got 8 cores and 16 threads. It base clocks at about 3.3 gigahertz, and it can boost all the way up to 5.1 gigahertz. And the TDP is configurable on this. You can set it from anywhere between 9 and 30 watts. And it does have 12 graphics cores in it, which help give some decent performance at the resolutions you're going to be running in a mobile gaming. So the screen natively on here is 2560 by 1600. It is multi-touch. It's IPS with 500 nits. It's a 16:10 ratio. It's rated for 144 hertz. And then on the front, you've got Gorilla Glass 5 on it. Also, if you need to, you can bring down the resolution all the way down to 1200 by 800 in order to help save battery power. And you can even adjust the refresh rate. And that all happens fairly easily with the click of this button over here, which brings up the Lenovo performance thing. And this is where it lets you set all kinds of different parameters as far as your performance goes for your OS, for your CPU. Here's where you can downclock your resolution, and you can do Radeon Super Resolution in here. You can turn on frame rate monitors if you're into seeing those kinds of numbers while you're running games or benchmarks. For connectivity, it's got 802.11ax and Bluetooth 5.1. There is this touchpad over here for the mouse, which is a little bit interesting to use. It's It's capable of getting you around the Windows OS, but you really want to stay inside of containers like Steam Big Picture or even like the Xbox app. Does really well with the controllers, which are currently set. I have them as an Xbox style controller. For ports, on the bottom, we've got one micro SD card slot and a USB 4 40 gig that does power delivery and display port over it. So you could theoretically dock this up and use it as a workstation. There are specific modes for that. We've also got kind of this Xbox style layout with the XYAB over here, the two thumbsticks and the D-pad. The thumbsticks feel really well. I really like them. This D-pad over here leaves a little bit to be desired, but there's already mods out in the 3D printing community to help mod this to take D-pads from Xbox Elite, the modular D-pads, and put them in here. Of course, you've got the two triggers on the front. And then taking a look at the back of the unit, I've actually got the back popped off of mine to take a look at the serviceability of it. First, let's address the buttons and the controllers on the back. You've got two buttons laid out this horizontally over here, and then vertically you've got two buttons here. So these controllers are actually detachable on the sides, which is really interesting to see, so you can kind of do some handheld gaming. So you can actually detach this one on the side here, and it's got a little bit of a mouse sensor in the bottom here. When you flick this on, you can actually dock this into a ring that Lenovo gives you with it, and then you kind of use these as the mouse left and right click, and then you've got a thumb scroll wheel here. Lenovo calls this FPS mode. Definitely helps getting around the device better when you're outside of a gaming environment, and definitely has a bit of a learning curve as you're going through playing FPS games, especially if you're coming from a more traditional mouse. But I will say it is ergonomically designed and was actually fairly comfortable to use for longer periods. Looking at the inside here, we've got our APU fan, which the APU is buried under here. It's got a nice big copper heat pipe going over, and this radiates out kind of the same spot where all the handhelds are doing it these days. Down here, you've got an user upgradable NVMe SSD. This is the 2242 model, so this is one that I'm going to try and upgrade in here. This is the Sabrent 1TB model, which is double-sided. This is an SK Hynix in here. It's also 1TB. It is single-sided. Taking a look with the battery, we've got a little bit of cabling and stuff to get back and forth across the device. We've got our Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chip down here, so you'd have to take care if you were going to replace the battery to make sure not to tear these delicate cables, as they do kind of crisscross everywhere. There's a little more space available inside here than I was expecting to see, but overall it's pretty well robust, compact design. So getting into the Legion Go was a little bit of a trick, mostly due to the clips and the arrangement around the edge. So anyone looking to take theirs apart, you've got two clips right here. You've got these two larger ones at the bottom, and then of course those two on the side are mirrored on each side, and then on the top you've got a little bit larger one here, and the main clips around here. I found it easiest when I was getting into this one. I started right around this corner here to minimize, because the plastic deforms so much. I actually ended up going through two of these and a guitar pick trying to get in before I gave up and finally just pulled out a knife. There's 6 total screws, 3 along each side. These came out really easy. They're just standard Phillips screws. Lenovo does have the hardware maintenance manual available for this guy, so you're able to kind of get step by step and follow along. But like I said, that's just the tips that I had getting into mine with minimizing the damage. So now that we are around back here, they do have this little kickstand for it, which I find really handy, especially using it on the desk. I've actually been using this and did all of my testing with it just below my main monitor. And then I used a seamless KVM network app to kind of interact with it with my main keyboard and mouse. It was also kind of interesting. I found myself putting little YouTube videos or other things kind of on a secondary little screen that was basically wireless right down below where my main monitor was. So I think there's a lot of different use cases you could have for one of these. If you're buying it solely for handheld gaming, that's great, but lots of interesting spots you could fit this into your workflows. So wrapping up the review, I've got everything put back together and the controllers snapped on. Overall, I really like the device. The build quality is definitely there. It feels solid in the hands. It's definitely on the thicker side. It's considerably thicker than the Steam Deck. The controllers do take a bit to get used to due to them being detachable. I think there's some good design limitations there, but once you're used to it and you kind of know where the button placement is and how to reach for everything, it's very easy to adapt to. It becomes second nature. Overall, it's a cool device. We're excited to have it here in the Edge Lab. The detachability of the controllers actually brings up some really interesting use cases, such as using it kind of standalone, having it maybe in your server room or in your home lab, and just being able to interact with like iDRAC or ILO or any sort of IPMI or KVM in a pocketable device like this that is not super bulky, but it's still touchscreen and it's still running full fat Windows, so you can get WSL on here and you can do anything you need to do. very portable, easy to use. Overall, decent impression with the Legion Go. This isn't a super in-depth review, but it was kind of a first look. I hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure you subscribe and hit that like button. Help support the channel.